So, yeah, thanks everybody. I'm going to talk about ICMS as a standard, and we've tried to implement ICMS in KOSMOS over the last kind of 3 to 4 years. And standards should be easy to implement, right? So I'm just going to talk through about what ICMS is, what we have done in relation to the structure of ICMS, I guess the good, the bad and the ugly about ICMS, and giving you some examples of why we've implemented the standard. But just a little bit on myself. I'm the founder of KOSMOS, and we're a digital cost consultancy based out of Copenhagen, and our Irish office is in Limerick. And also founder of the Fifth Dimension, and that's our SaaS company. And that's a cost reporting, collection, and data analytic cloud-based solution that uses ICMS as the standard. But ICMS, International Cost Management Standards, or International Construction Management Standards, it has changed its name over the last number of years. We're at a revision 3 right now, which includes embodied carbon, so it's going to allow you also to track embodied carbon within your construction project, so cost and carbon together. This will become the future of quantity surveying in terms of what we need to manage. But I've highlighted some interesting words here in this explanation. This is from the ICMS website. So ICMS provides a high-level structure and format for classifying, defining, measuring, recording, analysing and presenting the life cycle costs and carbon emissions associated with construction projects and constructed assets. It's not a measurement rule, it's just a structure, and I'll talk a little bit about that through the presentation. So what is ICMS? ICMS, in its sense, is a structure for recording cost. It's a global standard. Coalition of around 49 global organisations got together around 2015 or thereabouts, including some of the Irish companies, of course, to develop a cost standard so that we could record cost on a national and international level on all construction projects. The standard has been translated into 5 different languages at the moment, but it is not a measurement rule or pricing rule. It does not replace the agreed rules of measurement. It does not replace the national rules of measurement or new rules of measurement in the UK, NRM. It is purely an overarching structure. And I'll talk through the different levels of ICMS just to give you an indication, or at least an understanding of what that is. It's a little bit difficult to read, but I'll use the cursor. So ICMS is broken into levels. Levels are important in terms of hierarchy and data. Level 1 will be the buildings, or right up to 19, which is land formation and reclamation. That means that ICMS can be used for any type of construction project that we can conceive. Then that goes into a level 2, which is acquisition, construction costs, end of life. You can see it across here on this A, B, C, D, E. Level 3, which is this detail here, and I have a much clearer image later on to show you. That's the cost groups like substructure, superstructure, architecture, finishes, services, etc., etc. And then level 4, that's discretionary. That's your method of measurement. Your method of measurement falls in under this, whether it's ARM or if it's NRM or whatever local method of measurement you can use. And like that, it's just, that was on a vertical, this is a horizontal, same principle. All of these types of works here on the left into your level 1, into your groups, into your subgroups, into your method of measurement, etc., etc. So the structure, and this is the first time we have had a global structure and cost anywhere, and I can ask anybody here in the room or even online about national databases of construction costs. There's none available, they don't exist. The RICS tried with BCIS, but that's all retrospective. So ICMS will be the first standard actually that we will have in a global sense. So it's quite interesting actually for our profession in terms of cost data and cost collection. Again, when we open up the levels, we can begin to see here on 1, acquisition, construction, renewal. That's that level 1, level 2. Under acquisition, you have subheadings. That's your cost groups, and same under construction, your subheadings. And under that, then your method of measurement will fall in under. As you can see, these are purely headings. They don't determine the unit of measure or anything like that. But ICMS is much more than just cost. While we are recording cost on construction projects, in particular, it's for recording project attributes as well. So who are the consultants on the project? Who are the clients? What's the location? What's the building type, size, quality levels? All of this aspect relating to the projects is extremely important to understand the cost of your project, especially when you're benchmarking later on historical projects and information, whether it's a high quality school, a low quality school, Dublin city centre, outside of Dublin, etc., etc. So the project attributes are really the first time that we begin to collect this information on projects. And I know the likes of Dalux below will capture some of these project attributes within their software. But from our perspective now as QSs and investors, ICMS has really defined what this is, as well as the procurement strategy, risk levels, all of that stuff. So it's quite good in terms of the granularity we can now collect within ICMS. But the big question for me is why standardise? And we've heard from the guys earlier how important standards are and the benefits you can get from it. But in simple terms for us, I would say that what we're trying to do is take traditional manual processes within the quantity surveying environment. We're trying to standardise as much as possible those processes so that we can digitise those processes so that in the future we can automate. So we can have machine learning and AI, as we were talking about earlier, to take over a lot of what we do as QSs and automate it, because a lot of what we do today is still very administrative, and we want to be able to change that in the future, especially the challenges we have around getting skilled and qualified QSs in the global market. But construction, and for us, in terms of information, and standards will allow you to collect data, and data is information, and information can be analysed, right? But when you look at construction compared to other industries, we are second from the bottom just after hunting and agriculture, but we are very much undigitised and unconnected in terms of our information communication. And one of the slides earlier on showed that. We work with Excel, PDFs, Microsoft, fantastic platforms of software, but in terms of interoperability and connectivity, completely unconnected. So our cost reports today are done on our estimating platform. They might be brought into Excel, they might go from Excel to Word, Word to PDF, PDF to email. All of that is completely unconnected. So for us, standardization will allow us to collect information. And from that, we can then, that information can be structured and reported on. Again, we can embed in our manual process, whether it's PDF or what have you today, but that information level is very important. So looking at ICMS level 1, you're talking about building costs, total cost of the building, total cost of the project. Level 2, level 3, and when you get to your granularity level 4, it's price per square metre for block work, price per door, etc., etc. So that information level, this pyramid, we use quite a lot trying to explain ICMS to our client base and why we use it as a structure. But ICMS, excuse me, so ICMS, we embed that as our standard structure, as I mentioned before. And we have set it up as a master file within our estimating software. And I have an example of a project here that we have used, and I'll get into a little bit more detail. So ICMS is a structure we've embedded under each of the different building types within this particular project, meaning that we can revert back to a master file. That allows us to work with multi-buildings, multi-models, multi-levels of information. It's massive. But ICMS allows us to standardize that process, and if we can standardize, we can also speed up our process and become much more efficient. But having a structure in place also allows us to collect that data and to analyze that data. So if we have ICMS as the basis for each of our projects, and those projects are categorized under a standard for portfolio, let's just hypothetically say that portfolio B is social housing, portfolio A is data centers. We can begin to analyze different projects inside a portfolio to understand the cost drivers and then look at more efficient ways of designing, building, better materials, etc., all collected within a database. So ICMS allows us now to collect this information and begin to structure and standardize how we use information within the project. And that brings me on to data and data management. why we use ICMS is because it's a standard, it's a global standard. The reason we use it is to collect information. That information is data, and that data needs to be managed. This is where it becomes really powerful. So we need to go from today, we look at construction projects as a very kind of linear process. We start, we finish. Even numerically, it's this linear process. We start, we finish. And today we don't use the information at the end really that well, or the information we have produced in between, because we're totally unconnected in the construction industry, like the previous graph was showing. So what we're trying to do with ICMS is we're trying to change that linear process into a circular process. So standards and the ICMS standards allows us to collect information along the project life cycle and feed it into the beginning of the next project and repeat. So we're beginning to collect a vast amount of data on each project that helps us evaluate and prepare for the next project. And of course, by doing that, we're closing that kind of loop and creating the circular process and cost circularity in our projects, in our business. But that's not just for us here in KOSMOS, of course. This really should be looked at a regional level and national level. If we can begin to standardize the industry with ICMS, like potentially to be coming later this year, it means we can collect information on a standard process through all our projects, analyze it, become more efficient, and then to be able to advise on improving our projects and bringing in more automation. But data management is, I guess, it's the new estimating for us. We don't estimate anymore. We're not quantity surveyors, we're data managers. We standardize our rate libraries, so we can standardize our data models so that we can feed that into our projects in an ICMS structure to get an output. We can begin to automate a lot of this. And the reason we do this, of course, is, I repeat this graph again, so we can analyze all our projects under their standard portfolios within this ecosystem of ICMS, meaning in the future we will be able to become way more efficient with machine learning, etc. So, ICMS implementation, it should be easy, right? So when we've brought on ICMS as our standard, we figured, it would be simple enough to implement in our organization. And we're an SME, we're about 18 strong at the moment. So for us, it's quite adaptable. We're very agile. And so implementing ICMS for us wasn't going to be a challenge as we thought. But as we begin to look at ICMS, there's a number of things it doesn't do for us, and that our communication with the team in ICMS and the discussions with them, their development also for the next revision will include some of this. But what ICMS doesn't look at is multi-building. It's just a cost standard, but multi-building projects are kind of more important today, but understanding your building costs for each building type within that project is important, and ICMS doesn't define that in their structure. It defines it as project, not relation to how you would break down that cost. And coming back to this project we have, which has 26 buildings, it has 165 models, unfederated. You have external works, preliminaries, preambles. So your documentation you're producing here is up on the 30s. And to be able to do that rapidly on a project, we need to standardize. And by using ICMS as a master file, we were able to standardize the entire project. And so our cost estimates and cost plans can be done within 2 to 3 weeks, not 2 to 3 months, because of that standard. And that has allowed us to become much more efficient. But also the collection of the cost data, each building in ICMS allows us to overlay the buildings so we can look at cost drivers to understand how come building 13 is different to 14? Is there more efficiency we can drive in the buildings? And ICMS, it doesn't actually allow you to report to your client in the way the client wants. So you're going to have to change the standard depending on your clients. I mean, you're going to have to map it. So ICMS, it doesn't clearly define direct construction works. It doesn't clearly define indirect construction works or client costs. Our clients like to look at the cost breakdown of their projects in this way. Direct, indirect, with being contractor costs and their client costs underneath. ICMS doesn't define that. So we have altered the standard slightly, and I mentioned something the last day, once you change a standard, it's not a standard anymore, right? But if you consider ICMS as a coding structure, and you consider data management You can alter your standard in terms of how it's structured as long as you're following your coding structure and that stays true. So you can see in the indirect costs and client costs, they'd have some same numbering systems. Because as I mentioned before, ICMS does not define risk allowance for the construction or the contractor versus the client in that way. It defines risk. And so what we've done is we've split it, but the code is the same. So in our machine learning in the future, we'll be able to analyze these risks, taxes, consultancy fees, etc., because of the coding structure. And that's where it's key for us. And so ICMS is a standard structure, but just on the headings down to a level 3. And it's important to understand that. And that coding structure here at the beginning is a standard from ICMS. We just take that directly. So again, in the future, that coding structure will play true for us when we begin to get more efficient in analysing the data. The levels beneath that then come from your local method of measurement, which is whether it's ARM, NRM, or whatever local method you use. This is cost plan level, as you can see, so lots of sums. And, you don't have units of measure yet, very high level at the moment. But that's how ICMS works. So it is transferable across jurisdictions, but you need to embed that local standard underneath. And that can be quite challenging because a lot of countries don't have standards when it comes to cost breakdown or don't have methods of measurement. So it can become a challenge, as well as how some countries and companies procure. They don't really understand why you break costs down in this way. A lot of companies still break it down in trades. You can map ICMS and your method of measurement to whatever trade structure you want. That's not an issue. And most of these we have mapped already, whether it's under the national building standards or what have you. But for us, I guess the final frontier using ICMS is the standardization of that cost structure. The collection of that cost information will allow us in the future to use machine learning and AI to really become way more efficient and advise our clients. If you can consider using an example like Dublin City Council want to build a new school, they will be able to log on to some cloud-based solution, type in the parameters of their school. That will tell them a cost, it'll tell them a risk profile. It'll actually tell them what consultants they should be using and what contractors they should be using. If we're collecting all of this data in one location. And that's what ICMS really will be proved to be very powerful in the future. But for us, I would see that ICMS is the first step in the data analytics structure, and we'll follow on with the rest of these coming down the track, I would say. For me, definitely the machine learning aspect is going to be very, very big. If we can predict our construction in the future by looking back at the information we have from the past, it will become really powerful in controlling that expectation level at the very beginning for our clients. But all of that, as I said, starts with ICMS and that structure. So just some conclusions here as I begin to wrap up. Standards and standardizing, it's key for improving the business and project efficiency. The more you standardize, the more your team get used to that structure. It means they're not thinking about that structure anymore, they're thinking about something else and concentrating on something else. If you sit at the start of your project and talk about which structure should be used, or someone pulls a structure from the drawer that they had on the previous project, everybody else in the team needs to upskill and understand that structure. Whereas if you're using standards like ICMS, you train people once and then they understand it. And then that structure is used in every project. So you can move people from project to project quite efficiently because they know where to look and how to work with the standards. That team understanding, it becomes very important, especially when we look at BIM and specializations. Projects are getting way more technical when it comes to MEP. So what you end up having is you have top of your team becomes a commercial manager supported by these specialists. So when these specialists come in using these standards and they already know them, they can come in and out of the projects. It becomes super efficient. And standardization is required to move towards data management, as I mentioned. So the simplest thing we can do is standardize. We don't have to have a software or a platform to standardize. We can just take the standards and work in the way we work today. If that's Excel, it doesn't really matter. What you're trying to do is get people to work with the standards and your organization to work with the standard. In the future, by doing it now, in the future, you will have already collected that data, even though it's Excel and PDF. It doesn't really matter, but it's in that same structure. You'll be able to transfer rapid, quick to a platform, a system, and by using artificial intelligence to move that information for you. That's definitely the key if you don't want to jump too far ahead in terms of digitization. Just take the incremental baby steps and it becomes super powerful. So I would also say use your network to help and advise when it comes to standards. Lots of people know lots of things, so try to get that information from them, like ourselves. You just contact us, we're all over LinkedIn. And I would say, like the QR codes, I like that as well. You're going to see that here as well from us. Just scan the QR codes, phone numbers, LinkedIn pages, all of that stuff, and we're happy to talk to anybody. Yeah.
Thanks, Ross. And thanks, Ross, for making the big effort to come up with